1 1 1 2 2 2 3 3 3 4 4 4 4 5 5 5 6 6 7 7 7. I'm going to turn the master down to 0 7 7 8 8 8 8 8 9 9 9 9 9 9 9 10 10 10 all the way up back down 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 down.
I think there's
We need to get something in place.
so much emphasis placed on that.
Good morning, everyone.
Right, yeah, right. Nice seeing you.
It's good to see such a wide awake and enthusiastic group, or at least maybe enthusiastic. I'd like to welcome you to our briefing this morning. As you can see, it's one of our smaller get-togethers, so we appreciate your showing up. Well, actually, we really do appreciate and are very grateful for you taking the time out to join us this morning. I'm John Lena, the Director of Performance Consulting at Psychological Associates, and on behalf of all my colleagues here, we're very grateful for you taking the time out from your busy schedules to join us. Some of you, as you're coming in, were very familiar faces to me. Some of you are our customers. Some of you maybe don't know too much about Psychological Associates. Basically, we're a performance improvement consultancy here in St. Louis, and we specialize in helping organizations increase productivity in two ways. We help them with people decisions, and we help them with development decisions for those people. People decisions in that we help organizations make sure they have the right people in the right spots, doing the right things. And on the people development area, we help them with skills and productivity abilities to improve cooperation and collaboration. One area in which we do that is by means of improving leadership. And henceforth, the title of our briefing today, Leadership That Gets Results. Before going any further, I'd like to introduce a few people. One of them is Joe LaMantia, our Senior Vice President of Business Development. Joe?
I just want to welcome you once again on our 45th year in business, and of course you and people like you are responsible for us being here today. So this year we're giving a series of these, and hopefully they'll be beneficial for you, and just to say thank you as a great bunch of patrons for our business. John?
Thank you, Joe. Okay, we asked of you to do a lot of things. You had to get up a little earlier perhaps. You had to rearrange your schedule, do some extra effort. But we feel that you probably did that because there's some issues that you're facing possibly within your organization that deal specifically with leadership. Just a quick show of the hands. How many are experiencing some burning issues with leadership within their organization? How many of you are running into obstacles with leadership within your organization? How many came here today just to get some tidbits and some ideas for some alternative ways of working through leadership? And how many of you didn't have anything else better to do? Now seriously, we are confident that you will get a lot out of this morning. We know that you had to go through some extra effort. We did too, but one thing we consistently hear from our customers is that we don't waste their time. So we will be very considerate of what your time expectations and also goal expectations are for today. A little bit of housekeeping. In front of you, there is a packet that looks like this. I'll kind of, if you haven't found it already, if you could find it. In that packet, there's first off a copy of this presentation, so you don't have to go crazy trying to copy all the notes from the screen. There's also some information on our presenters. There's a little bit more detail, specifics as to who we are and what we do at Psychological Associates. There's also a schedule of upcoming events. We have these periodic briefings that really cover three different areas. This one is a management series. We also have one on sales, and we also have one geared specifically toward CEO briefings. And some of you may be on those mailing lists as well. If you, by the way, would like to get on that mailing list, if you haven't received something on our previous briefings, be sure to make a note of that because in your packet is also a feedback sheet that we would like for you to complete at the very end of the briefing. And just make a note on that if, yes, I would like to have information about your upcoming briefings. Or maybe if there's someone in your sales organization who would like to attend our sales briefing. With that, also I want to make sure that everyone give us your business card when you first came in. Did anyone not do that? Okay, good. The reason why we're having some drawings at the very end of the briefing, and then one of the drawings will be for a free seat in our Leadership Through People Skills workshop. It's an $1,800 value, so we want to make sure everyone had an opportunity to be in that drawing. Okay, with that, I'd like to get our briefing going, and with that, I'd like to introduce our two speakers. First will be Alan Gerstein. Alan is a 30-year veteran of Psychological Associates. He's highly regarded and experienced instructional consultant for us. His area of specialty is leadership and executive development. Also, the co-presenter will be Dr. Robert Lefton, this very extinguished, very good-looking boss of mine over here. Bob is an author, a lecturer, and he is a performance improvement consul for many Fortune 500 organizations. Bob is also the founder and president of Psychological Associates. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the specialists. Alan, I believe it's Robert, sorry, a little bit out of sync here. Dr. Robert Lefton.
Thank you, John. First, let me see, Jeff, can they hear me back there? Good. If just start waving your arms if my voice falters. We have, you can hear me, Angela? Good. We have an interesting and complicated topic today, but one that's fascinated people for years and years. I can remember when we first founded the organization in 1958, we were asked to do some leadership training for an organization. And my partner and I, Vic Bazada, thought, well, what are we going to tell them? And we told them the only thing we knew anything about. We gave a lecture to them on Freud. We talked about the id, the ego, and the superego, and of course the libido. And you know, the interesting thing about that lecture is that we got a lot of good pats on the back for the lecture, and people said they learned a lot, and we thought, wow, maybe we're really on to something. You know, we go around telling people, look, you got to strengthen your ego, make sure you got a firm superego, and ramp up your id a little bit, and you'll be all right as a leader. Hopefully, over the years, we've learned a great deal more about leadership and leadership that gets results. By results, we mean a leader who gets financial results, achieves their financial goals, achieves their business goals, but also a leader who connects with people, who captures the minds of people, who gains the understanding of and commitment of people. It's just not enough today to achieve results, but what's also crucial as a leader is how they connect with people and how they develop their people. So I'm going to talk to you today about how we enable people and teach people to be meaningful leaders, the kind of things that we go through and the kind of topics we're going to talk about today is first, how do we diagnose and develop leadership practices and strategies? When someone is referred to us or someone is referred to you, what's a good way of diagnosing what the situation is? Part of your job, whenever you refer someone in your organization who has leadership issues, is putting what I call the leadership puzzle together. Where does this person really need help to become a more effective leader? And we're going to address that today. Also, we're going to talk about some of the most common leadership styles in organizations and the impact each of these styles has on getting results and on productivities. We're going to talk about common obstacles to effective leadership. And we're going to give you some practice tips that we hope you can use back on the job. Let's first talk about the kind of leaders that we see that refer to us and where over the years we have learned the most about leaders. Probably the most we've learned about leaders are the people who we would call high potential people who are referred to us. We're amazed as organizations refer leaders to us for development that the vast majority of people they refer to us really are high potential people. They're fast learners, they're on a fast track. And you might ask, why would they do that? Well, they want to do that because they feel they're going to get the most out of these people in the long run. In addition to that, we get leadership development for the entire organization. Many organizations, there's a few sitting here right in this room who are representative of organizations where we do a great deal of leadership work for all of their executives from the very top of the organization down to first line supervision. And then about 15 to 20% of the people we work with would be referred to us because it's a remedial situation. It's where a person has an issue with the organization. They may intimidate people, they might abuse people, or their effectiveness as leaders may not be very high. They may have some very bad habits that need correcting. So as you can see from this, we get a gamut, the wide gamut of different kinds of leaderships. And you say, well, what do we do when they come in? How do we, what do we do to diagnose and to understand the problem? Well, the most traditional tool that we have available for us, the one that we started out with many years ago, was the classic interview, where we just would interview the person. Today it's very common in many organizations where we get access to their direct reports. We can interview their peers, their boss. We interview the person themselves. In some situations we'll even interview customers if they're in the marketing or the sales area to learn about the individual. Also today we have more structured interviews. The hot topic today and a very important tool of learning about people is what we call the behavioral interview. And the behavioral interview comes about through first studying the competencies that are crucial in a particular leadership position, and then designing questions, interview questions, which help you to get information about these competencies. Another important aspect, which has become very popular, especially over the last 15 years, is executive assessment. There have been many fine tools which have been developed in the areas of cognitive skills, in the area of interest, in the area of personality and leadership tests and interpersonal skills. So it's very common today to put an individual through a series of questionnaires and tests, which gives us greater insight into his or her leadership style. Plus, if you take the development of the 360-degree feedbacks, we've been doing that now for 25 years, where we provide survey forms to a person's direct reports, their peers, their boss. They take it themselves. We gather this data. It gives us wonderful information regarding how this individual's constituencies perceive him in the world of work. So if you take the interview, if you take the 360 feedback, if you take the executive assessment, and then you combine that with simulations. And simulations is where we put people into simulated activities in our office, and we role play it through with them, and we capture that on TV tape, and then we're able to look at that very carefully and analyze how did this person come across in this simulated activity. Again, another aspect of diagnosing and gathering data is watching a person behave in a leadership seminar. So we have, every month, we have a leadership seminar. A person will oftentimes enroll in that session, and we're able to see the person in action with a team of individuals for 3.5 full days. Our person may go through team building, and we're able to see him in team development and get a good view of his or her leadership style there. And another source of data is, of course, reviewing a person's performance data. How did they, what kind of performance ratings have they had on the job and so forth. With all of this kind of assortment of information, we're then able to gather this and put together what I call the puzzle of leadership. What can we do to help this person really rise to a different level of leadership? And usually the kinds of prescriptions that comes out of putting this puzzle together is we might have for some leaders just a very intense feedback session. The feedback session may last no more than 1 or 2 sessions. Other individuals we coach. And when we coach, it's usually very quick. It may be no more than meeting with the person for 4 or 5 times. On the other hand, we may not only coach, but we may also put the person into counseling. That's a far more in-depth procedure where we may meet with the individual once or twice a month for a period of a year or 2. I have several CEOs that I started a counseling relationship with. One goes now, I've been with him for 22 years. He's a CEO, and I can't get him to quit using me. He's in New York now, running a big company in New York, and he keeps wanting me to come in and work with him. So perhaps I didn't do a very good job of resolving what I used to call the transference relationship in old psychotherapy. Also, another prescription, of course, is to put people through a formal seminar. Something like leadership through people skills. Alan Gerstein will tell you more about that, or put them through an intensive team building experience. And the kind of team building experience we like to put people through is one that's very business oriented, where they talk about issues related to their team. I can remember many years ago when we did our first team building, we did it with Tinker Toys, where we would watch a group of people put Tinker Toys together. Today we don't do that. Today we build teams by watching people and putting them together with other people and having them talk about real issues facing their team. And in that way you can get an unbelievably good insight into the leadership style of the person. It just gives you more data. Also, what's really crucial when you're developing a leader is the kind of development plan that you end up with. And the development plan has to usually be very measurable. It has to be very specific. And we like to have it detailed in the following areas. What can the person do by himself or herself that will increase the quality of their leadership? Then in addition, what can the person do with other people? What can they do with their direct reports, for example? What can they do with their peers? What can they do with the boss? And then what kind of training might they take? And then how are you going to follow up on these? And what kind of objectives and action plans are you going to have? And how are you going to follow up in a continuous way with this individual? The kind of development plan you develop and the kind of action plan you develop is crucial if sound leadership development is going to occur. Now, how do we then go about modifying behavior? Once you got all this information and you put it together, what are the different techniques that we have for modifying and changing leadership behavior and helping the person to become more effective? Well, I can tell you this. We don't talk about the id, the ego, the superego anymore. That's passé. But what we try to do with individuals are the following. We first try to create self-awareness. We try to create a situation where a person becomes aware of how they're coming across to others. But more than self-awareness, we also try to teach behavioral skills, which we'll talk about later. In fact, we've come to the conclusion that one of the great breakthroughs that has occurred in teaching leaders is the insight that we gained into teaching behavioral skills. It's not enough just to make a person self-aware, but what you also can do to help a person become more effective is to teach them different types of skills. For example, teaching them how to inquire, or teaching them how to manage conflict and disagreement, or teaching them how to put touchy issues up on the table. Another important part of behavior change is attitude change. Can we change a person's attitudes about what's important in leadership, their attitudes towards people? Another agent for change is getting people involved, active participation. Also, getting a person to role model certain types of behavior, getting them to observe best practice, rewarding them when they display more effective behavior, and then just good development planning. Now, I'm going to turn this on to over to Alan now, and he's going to take this a step further.
Thank you. I thought we'd start with all the things that we do know, which is what causes people to go bad. There was an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal. In fact, it was on the front page. And we're talking about some of the more common things that happens at the very top. One of the issues certainly is never ignore your company's culture and power structure. You know who signs the check, know how the game is played. No matter how smart you are, no matter how savvy your strategy, it's going to fail without the boss's support. Major European company, bldg, CEO, brilliant, phenomenal strategist, comes in. Turns out that as part of his strategy is to sell off uninteresting businesses. Except the founder found out about the divestiture in the news media, and the company that was being sold was the one that was nearest and dearest to his heart. There is now an unemployed CEO. Leaders who are so self-absorbed that they ignore all the rules, collaboration, respect for others, bullies, intimidators, people who force compliance but don't build commitment. It works, or could have worked in the 90s when the business was good, but now, in a tough economy, you need all the cooperation, collaboration, and the willingness of people. We don't want compliance. What we're really looking for is commitment. So the real challenge is how do you get commitment, not how do you coerce compliance. They fail. And then the other part is keeping in touch with reality. It's one thing to be a visionary, and some people feel that's the role of the leader, is to stake out the vision. It does help to listen to people who know business, understand the business, and one of the key flaws for executives often is they stop listening. They start reading their own press releases and believe them. They have become legends in their own mind. It's scary. Very bright, very capable, very talented people who all failed. The headline, it was in the Wall Street Journal relatively recently in December. Now, if you look at it, what causes failure? When you think about it, we've all either observed it in others, because none of us would have ever gone down that road, but we know what causes failure. It usually is not content in terms of being bright, being motivated. It's more often how you go about implementing, communicating. So success factors come in now. Hey, it helps to be smart. Have you ever looked in the Wall Street Journal? They said wanted 3 dumb executives. Business doing well, HR believes clearly in the bell-shaped curve. We have 5 outstanding executive senior vice presidents, and what we're looking for is a handful of idiots. No. So being smart means you get to play the game. It doesn't have any real indicator in how well you're going to do at the game. The other one certainly is, you're going to know your business. This doesn't come as any surprise. The technical skills are critical. The thing that's becoming more and more, we're becoming more aware of, is maybe a better way of saying it, is not the IQ, but the EQ, being emotionally intelligent, being willing and able to work effectively with people. So that looks like this. The ability to manage one's feelings so that you express them appropriately. You can be annoyed, you can be angry, you can be irritated. You should not act in an annoyed, angry, or irritated manner, because that's going to be counterproductive. So it's okay to feel that, but then the question is, how can you best express your feelings so that you get the change you want in others? So the ability to manage your feelings so they are expressed appropriately, enabling people to work together towards common goals. And then the work is from Daniel Goleman out of Harvard, and you look at some of the things that are critical. One of them being self-awareness, and that you really understand the impact your approach has on others. If it's effective, why? How can you leverage that? If it's ineffective, why? How can you adapt, modify, and change in order to be more effective? And then self-management. Awareness precedes choice, but choice requires alternatives. And so what are you going to do differently to be more effective? One size usually fits none. We must have some retailers here. You know, does one size fit all? No. So what's right with Gene could be wrong with Jeffrey. What works great with Jeffrey is the wrong thing with Nancy. So how do you really sort out and adapt your approach to get maximum impact from the greatest number of people? Requires self-management. Also requires empathy, understanding why people do what they do. What drives that behavior? We were doing some research on performance appraisal, and the thing that was fascinating is that we found all the things that bosses do wrong. And the people we surveyed were willing to tell us all the things that their bosses did wrong. And of course, they didn't pass it on down because they were exemplary. But the bottom line is they were always committed to goals. So although they didn't have the feedback, they didn't have clarity of goals, they didn't have the support they needed, they all felt committed. And why do people commit? And if we could only tap into that energy, we could get so much more. And then the interpersonal skills. How do you work effectively with one another? So we're going to look at some approaches. And the model we're going to use, because it's copyrightable. Now, there are lots of other models out there, and we could use them, and they're probably almost as good, or maybe 75% as good, but you do own the copyright on... Okay. And it's also the one I know, so it's easiest to talk about the one I know. We're talking about a model that's predicated on behavior, not intentions. Now, I have an ex-wife who judged me by my behavior, not by my intentions. So the key thing is the north-south, from assertiveness to passivity, from dominance to submission, is the action axis. It's task. It's what the person does. Are they task-driven? Are they energized? Do they really put their heart and soul into doing the job and doing it well? Now, the east-west, the hostility or unresponsive behaviors, the warmth or caring responsive behaviors, is how they go about doing it. And everything is a combination of what and how. You don't have a what without a how, and the other side is you can't have the how you go about doing it without referencing it with a what. So we have said or described 4 styles of behavior. Q1 is aggressive, demanding, closed-minded. It's the bully, the autocrat, the martinet. Now, somebody did some research on the word martinet. Does anybody know where it comes from, to be a martinet? It was a French general, I think around in the Napoleonic era, who was known for spit and polish, picky, demanding, made his troops' life miserable, and so now enters into the lexicon a martinet. And do you know what happened to dear Field Marshal Martinet? His troops shot him. So, but you have a person here who is now coercing, bullying, and demanding. And in a bad economy, what happens? People stick with them. But as soon as the economy goes up and they perceive alternatives, they vote with their feet. So you tend to find a lot of turnover when you have a lot of Q1 behavior. You find people cutting corners, and that can lead you into some sorts of trouble as well. Q2, the bureaucrat. His favorite color is beige. A firm believer in the closed door policy, management by memo. There are only two creatures that do not have a reflection in a mirror. One is a vampire, and the other is a bureaucrat, because they're perfectly bland. Uninspiring, demotivating, go by the book. We don't find too many of those at the top. We find a lot of people with high energy, the Q1s. We find some, but they're primarily burnt out. Now you have the next, who's overly agreeable. We're going to call it Q3. They're warm, they're friendly, they value relationships, but it's relationship over task. And often you find that they're appeasing, they're quick to compromise, very, very friendly. They make great Cub Scout leaders, throw good parties, may not be the most effective boss, may not be the most effective leader in difficult times where you have to make hard decisions. And what we're looking for is somebody who's task-focused and yet sensitive to the other. And sensitive in a business-like way, understanding what drives people, and how to align their energies, their drives, their needs, their values with a corporation's or organization's needs and values in order to get optimum performance. So if you look at it in terms of trying to be more effective, first of all, we're going to suggest that you consider the other's behavior. Going back to one size not fitting all. And how do you then adapt so that you get that person's energies focused in the directions you want it to go in? People commit for their reasons and not yours. And the key to emotional intelligence is to understand or empathize with the other so you know their values and what drives them. Then demonstrate respect for their concerns, their needs, their feelings. I can give an assignment which I know Jeffrey's not going to like. We've talked, and he hates a lot of detail and busy work and fussy stuff. And the job requires doing it. But I think if I explain why I'm doing it, the importance of doing it, and offer maybe some help, and possibly frame it in such a way that it's short term, I can get high quality performance, as opposed to merely dumping the job on his desk, demanding that it get done, and walk away. And choose the appropriate communication methods. There are some people who are extremely verbal. I'm certainly not one of them, but there are many who continue to talk. And when you have a meeting, you have the sense that you're losing control, that you are sort of trying to organize a bunch of butterflies and get them all going in the same direction. If herding cats is difficult, herding butterflies is next to impossible. Well, how do you get that person to concentrate on task and have a significant and effective decision or discussion, excuse me? There are, excuse me? You would attract them. Right. Okay, makes sense. You attract them. A little bit of sweet is better than sour, I think. How do you get people with a lot to offer but are quiet? How do you get them to open up and talk so you can really capture what they have inside of them? So we're going to talk about some different communication methods. And certainly you don't want to provide a barrier or create a barrier. I'm going to suggest that when you see barriers that you confront and deal with them. Now the problem is, in a short time we have, you can't go through in depth, but I'd like to give you an overview how you might do it. If you were to see Q1, if you were working with one of your staff, and here's a good person, they're driven, they want to do a good job, but their style is creating problems. First of all, you want to stress the benefits that they will gain to their sense of control, their sense of status, how they will gain more status, more control by working with their staff, engaging their staff, as opposed to demanding of their staff or imposing on them. So you step back, you think through what's important to them, and help them understand how they will achieve their goals by doing what you want. I think that's called motivation. Then when you work with them, you want to have open questions, an expansive dialogue. Because think about it, if I ask for their opinion, it feeds into their sense of esteem. I'm demonstrating by questioning that I value. And listen, we have done research. We put people in a simulation. It's a controlled environment. It's the same scenario. We have actors. We find that people don't question. 6% of managers don't ask one question in a 15-minute discussion. Not one. They didn't even say, "How are you?" when the person came in the door. Over about 26% ask 3 or less questions. So the key to working effectively with Q1 behavior is open exploration of their ideas, coupled with active listening. Making sure you understand what they say, why they've said it, and then go one step deeper so that you really come in. We know that managers are quick to say, yeah, I understand, nod when they don't, and often they get it wrong. 25% of all managers never, in a 15-minute meeting, once demonstrate active listening. So what we try to do is certainly help them learn how to be more responsive, better questioners, and better listeners. And then the key here when you're dealing with Q1 is to act with confidence. What Q1 behavior responds to and respects is strength. If you are seen as nice, you're seen as weak. If you're seen as quiet or passive, you're seen as weak. And they detest weakness. So the key to working with Q1 is a direct and appropriately warm business approach, not shying away from the difficult conversations. They may not like it, but they'll respect you for it. So we try to teach the techniques of how to confront in a dominant way without domineering the other, but helping the other to think through what they're going to do, bottom line, gaining commitment. Now there are some with Q2 behavior. And you might say, well, let's get rid of them. Well, if you did, you'd have gotten rid of Einstein. And he did make a contribution to science somewhere down the road. He was a good student. You know, for all us C students, all those people who struggled with math, they always told us, well, Einstein was a failing math student. Nah, he was a brilliant math student. He was a prickly person, and his instructors didn't like him. It wasn't his competence, it was his personality. And so he couldn't get a job as a scientist. He ended up as a customs inspector somewhere in Switzerland, a functionary. I'm sure the great universities of Germany are really proud that they looked at the behavior and forgot to look at the essence of the man. So what we want to do here is to make them feel more comfortable with us. So we stress the things that are important to them. Because one of our keys is that we all broadcast our concerns, our needs through our behavior. The Q2 behavior, that quiet, low-key, aloof, distant behavior, is a person who likes predictability, likes rules, follows rules. So we're going to provide them a sense of security, a sense of stability. We're not going to rush them. We're going to be direct, appropriately demanding the best, but patient, working with them. So when we now communicate with them, if we were open with Q1, we have to be even more open or expansive with Q2. So it requires open inquiry, and then the hardest question of all to ask, the pause. It's really one that's difficult to phrase. People don't pause. We get uncomfortable and we fill the space, the vacuum. What we want to do is create an environment which draws the other toward us. And then listen. And if you were to ask open questions and pause, your effectiveness with Q2 behavior would increase by at least 25 to 30%. Doing nothing else than asking a question that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no, and then pausing. How many people have trouble with Q2 behaviors? Okay, what's the kind of problem that drives you nuts? They pause. So they have learned that if they pause, they don't respond, which means they play it safe, they don't take a risk, you'll fill the void. What we're going to suggest is when we get into that game, you just sort of smile at them and say, you know, Nancy, that's interesting. I really like to hear what you're thinking. And then pause again. And it will work. And the key here is being patient and lower key. What happens if you make demands of Q2? They stick their feet down, they dig their heels in, or in worst case, they revert to malicious obedience. They do just what you say with a desire to screw up the works. There can be a little malevolent side. They're not just wimps. They can be capable, but quiet. Then you have Q3. Friendly, affable. Their favorite line is one big happy family. We're just one big happy family. Tell that to Oedipus's father. Suggest that we're one big happy family to Abel or Joseph. We're not always one big happy family, but Q3 behavior is the ultimate denier. Denies the tensions that are normal, glosses over. We don't see problems until they become crises. We lose a sense of urgency. Decisions are mostly done by what's popular, what's acceptable, and that has to be a prescription for failure. To always do what's popular. I think the conventional wisdom is usually always wrong. So we're going to suggest the opposite strategy when working with Q3. Be contained, very focused, cut through some of the fluff, and hold their feet to the fire so that you bring out the best and hold them accountable for achieving results. The last is Q4. And the real challenge with Q4 behaviors is to keep them challenged. I think one of the problems is we tend to go to the problem children. We tend to spend a lot of time with those who are creating problems, the high maintenance. They're in our office. And that the people who are effective, cooperative, get left alone. Well, I'd rather spend 80% of my coaching time with my top performers than with my bottom performers. If I can get a 10% incremental increase, wouldn't it be better to get 10% from the top than 10% from the bottom? I mean, you only have so much time. And where are you going to spend that critical resource, an inelastic resource, to get maximum result? So we're going to suggest that when you see Q4 behavior, you talk to issues like getting results. You stay engaged with a lot of questions. You demonstrate concern and interest in them by active listening. And this is a joy, because you can be open, participative. It can be very combative, but it's a combat of ideas, not personalities. It's putting together thoughts and ideas and strategies, stressing them, challenging them, playing devil's advocate, goal being to come up with the best solution, the best approach to the business, as opposed to Q3, an easy one or a popular one, a Q2 always emphasizing a low risk, or Q1 where you do it without the input of those who know. So what we're suggesting is you vary your approach to the person. You think through their needs and concerns. You think through how you're going to communicate and how you're going to challenge. I'm going to let you wrap it up because you only gave me 20 minutes.
Thanks, Alan. Now, let me see if we can come up with some good tips for you by giving you some specific examples. For example, I had a recommendation to work with an executive vice president of a very large brokerage firm in New York, and he was known for his extremely Q1 qualities. And I was asked by his boss if I would see him and see if I could give him some advice that would help him with his leadership. And I really only had one shot because he was being transferred overseas. And I met with this individual for 45 minutes in his office in New York City. And he would ask me a question, and he had a bad habit. When you asked him a question, he would answer his own question. So he would ask me a question, then he would answer it, then he would ask me another question, then he would answer it, and I just decided I was going to wait this out and see how long it would last. I only did 3 mm-hms during the 45 minutes, and at the end of 45 minutes I couldn't stand it anymore, and I looked at him and I said, "Ross, do you realize that for 45 minutes you've been talking to yourself? I have not said one single word. All I've said is this, or that's it." And he sat there. Now, remember what I said, self-awareness and skills are 2 important things for changing behavior, because what I then did with this individual is talked about how could he have created a dialogue where he would have brought me into the picture and we would have had a good 2-way dialogue rather than a monologue. And what I taught him to do in the next hour was to use some good open-ended probes when he was talking, and some good pauses and summary statements. Now let me give you another example. There was an executive here in St. Louis who was the head of a major division of a company. His CEO came to me and told me that he couldn't stand to have his review meetings with this gentleman. He said, every time we have a review meeting, we get into a terrible fight. He starts arguing with me as soon as I say something. And he said, "Bob, he's got good results, but if I have to put up with this kind of stuff continually, I just want him out of here. So here, work with him." So I met with the guy, we met several times, and I noticed that as soon as you would say something, instead of asking a question about what I would say, his tendency was to immediately counter-argue. So I pointed that out to him. I said to him, "Jay, do you see that every time I say something, you immediately go on the offense? Instead of probing it to understand it more, You start arguing. I says, now let's talk about probing before you argue. In fact, when you meet with your boss, Jules, when he comes in, I want to sign a contract with you, and I wrote this out. When your boss makes a statement, you've got to ask 3 good open-ended questions before you argue. If after you ask 3 questions you choose to argue, great, but you've got to ask 3 good probes first. When I saw his boss about 2 weeks later, his boss says, "What'd you do? Put Jay on the couch?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because we had the best review we ever had." He said it was a great dialogue. Now, what are we learning from this? See, I didn't have to ask him about his mother. See? I didn't have to put him on the couch. See? But what I did do is I made this person aware of how they came across, and then I taught them 1 or 2 simple skills. So what it's boiling down to here is behavior change can occur if you take self-awareness and combine it with skills. We know this from long experience. Self-awareness itself is only effective for 3 to 5% of leaders. In other words, you can take a leader like Alan mentioned, say a very Q1 leader, a very autocratic leader. Let's say this leader never involves people, is demanding, is demeaning of others, barks out orders. By making that person aware, are you suddenly going to be able to change his behavior? And the answer is probably not. What you have to do is combine the awareness with learnable skills. You have to teach the person the skill of reaching out and involving people, of how to have a good two-way dialogue. You have to teach the person how to be candid and open in a constructive manner rather than a destructive manner, because Q1s are often destructive with their candor rather than constructive. So if you can combine the self-awareness with the skill building, the behavioral skills, that can dramatically help you shape the behavior of the leader you're working with. So let's look at the different skills that you can teach. Here are many of the skills that you can teach leaders to help them become more effective. I'm going to come up to the ones on benefit, the last one. But one of the great skills you can teach leaders is the skill of probing, inquiry, and listening. You will be shocked if you watch most leaders, and you watch them in meetings, or if you watch them in one-on-one dialogues, attract the kind of questions they ask. Every one of us has a probing style or an inquiry style. For example, if a person tends to be very Q1, they'll generally ask very closed probes or very leading questions. You'll rarely see them use open-ended probes or summary statements or pauses. So teaching a person to widen their array of probing can do marvelous things for a person who's autocratic, because a probe reaches out and involves people, and you can't make a good summary statement unless you've been listening. So it forces them and disciplines them to listen. Bringing up touchy issues. For example, many leaders have very touchy issues that they need to elevate and bring up on the table with direct reports, with peers or their bosses. Well, teaching them the skills of how do you elevate a touchy issue and discuss it in a two-way dialogue. Well, teaching people how to make effective what we call first-person statements, where you state the issue that you're concerned about in I terms. You state your feelings about the behavior, you state the consequences of the behavior, and then you ask the person, how can they help solve the problem? So what you're doing here is, again, you're teaching a behavioral skill that helps a person to elevate a touchy problem right on the table. Keeping your dialogue constructive and keeping it on a track. You can again, teach people skills for doing this. You can use the 5-step process. In the 5-step process, and let me just share one little part of that to you. It's what we call step 2. And that's when you're having a dialogue with another person. Always get their opinions first before you give yours. If I had learned and mastered that by the time I was 40 years old, I would have been a billionaire today. I can't tell you how important that is. Think about it. Asking the other person's opinions and views before you give your own. Too often, what leaders do is they express their views and their opinions too quickly. And when they do that, it's what we call promotional leadership. What they're really doing is shaping the group to agree with them. As a result of that, they're not getting the full range of information. So what you can see here, I hope, ladies and gentlemen, is that we don't really have to talk about the id, the ego, and the superego and the libido to train better leaders. We can use common business language, common sense language, help a person become self-aware, and help a person learn more skills, and then actively practice these skills, and put that all together with a good development plan, and you got all the ingredients for helping leaders rise to a different level and quality of leadership. With that, I'm going to open it up for some questions. Either Alan, come on up here and we can field some of these questions that come up. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Bob, how would you profile the current George Bush in terms of Q1, Q2, 3, and 4?
Ooh, that's a good one. Are you asking that question because you know of my interest in that, or?
No, a question I've been asked. So.
Oh, okay. For many years, my hobby has been analyzing U.S. presidents' behavioral styles, and George Bush is he's a difficult one for me. I'm waiting for the historians to offer more, but I see some elements of Q1 and Q2 and a tidbit of Q4. Not a lot. But maybe, Alan, what do you see, Alan?
A lot of above the line behavior, which would be the dominance, which is the Q1 to Q4. I think that's the majority. His delegation almost to the point of abdication is the Q2 for me. I don't see a lot of frivolous Q3.
No. Of course, we've had a culture in the country which doesn't promote much Q3 either. So, his father had a lot of Q3. Yes, sir.
You were called upon to advise him in working with his cabinet. What kinds of awareness and skill training would you suggest?
Well, here's what I would do, because there are a lot of skills. In fact, there was a wonderful book written a number of years ago by a professor from Yale called Victims of Groupthink, where this professor studied some public affair decisions that turned out to be fiascos. For example, the Bay of Pigs, and or being unprepared for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. There were several other fiascos. Of course, thalidomide was a terrible fiasco. What a lot of people didn't know is when John Kennedy failed at the Bay of Pigs, he asked this professor of Yale to come in and study what went wrong in that decision. In other words, he had a group of unbelievably intelligent people that he had assembled to help him make that decision. And how did this group of smart people make such a dumb decision? Think about it. Because it's very common. It's common to see smart people make dumb decisions. There's an old saying that insanity is the exception in the individual, but the rule in the group. And what Irving Janis did is he studied how Kennedy made this terrible decision, and he came up with 17 recommendations that he could put into play when he was confronted with another crisis. And Kennedy triggered these procedures when he had the Cuban Missile Crisis. And one of the things that Irving Janis counseled him to do was make a plea for candor and openness in the discussion. Also, he told them, don't express your views and what your opinion is till very late in the dialogue. What he did in the Bay of Pigs, within the first 20 seconds, he immediately came out and said, look, I favor the CIA alternative. Well, what he did by doing that is he immediately pulled about 50% of his group towards his point of view at that point. If you all ever want to shape the group to your point of view and you're the boss, announce your view first. Okay. And he had, in addition, another suggestion was that as an alternative began receiving favor, appoint a devil's advocate to critique the alternative that seems to be gaining favor. And what Janis was really doing there is recommending behavioral skills that the president could use that would increase the probability that he would make a better decision. And isn't that what leadership is all about, if you think about it? The ultimate measure of leadership is the quality of decisions you generate and your ability to execute, if you really think about it.
Often tied to your ability to cherish dissent. And when you try to squelch people with different views or different opinions, you then get into a phenomenon of groupthink. So I think one of the things is to reward people for thinking in opposition, and then explore it. If your views are right, they will prevail. And if not, you may have saved yourself from a major lawsuit.
Yes?
Is there a specific tool that you use to determine where a person is on that Q model?
Yes. In fact, Jeff, isn't there a handout for them on this? In your packet, you have a questionnaire that you can take. If you send it in to us, we'll tell you where you see yourself on the model. It's called the Dimensional Management Matrix. Is that in their packet? Take it, send it in to us. No cost associated with it, but we'll send you back a report. Yes?
Do you find that during tough economic times, like right now, that leaders change and go to a different...
The question is, in tough economic times, do leaders change? Yes, tough economic, that's an external pressure, and external pressure can change behavior. A lot of times you'll see a lot of Q1 coming out right now, or people just give up and Q2 it. Okay. So you see any type of pressure, whether it's external or internal, can move a person into their secondary style and cause a change.
Trying to simplify the question, I think this may be the last one, is do you need a supportive environment? And especially if you've got a larger organization with many levels, where do you start? Did I get it close to right? Okay. From the Consultant's Handbook, page 3. If you can, at the very top. If you can't, then I would try to find a pocket in the organization that is interested and willing, and then demonstrate business results. If you can work with a division, a group, a unit, and that unit achieves its goals, lowers its expenses, increases its customer satisfaction, whatever the key matrix numbers are, then I think others will listen. Talk is cheap, but if we can demonstrate through practical business results, organizational payouts, that being direct, being candid, being responsive to each other and our customers is good business, others will follow. Bob, what would you want to add?
I don't have anything to add to that. John?
Bob and Alan, thank you very much for a very informative briefing. It took me a long time to coach them on what to say, but they finally got it. Some closing things to do. We promised some things at the very beginning. We will get you out of here at very close to 9 o'clock. I know it's a little bit rushed. Bob mentioned the dimensional management matrix. Please send that in to us. We'll be glad to turn that back to you. Also, we have a drawing that we're going to conduct right now. And if Alan, if you wouldn't mind, have someone just pull a card out of this. The first one for the drawing is for a textbook, which covers a lot of the things that Alan and Bob talked about. It's our textbook, Leadership Through People Skills. Jeffrey Bogard from Vantage Homes. Jeffrey? Very close. Congratulations. The second drawing is for our free seat at our upcoming leadership workshop, Leadership Through People Skills. Alan, would you do the same?
You have that book of wisdom. Just a little gray on the side for maturity. It's all a con. There we go.
And that goes to Jim Sullivan with Pullman. Jim, where are you? Congratulations, Jim. Would you pass this down there to him? There's instructions, Jim, on there, what to do. Just contact me. By the way, as a way of thanking all of you, in your packets, there's a certificate or an envelope that has certificate on it, and it's a special 2-for-1 offer for you to utilize as our way of thanking you for joining us today. Simply, if you'd like to send two people to one of our upcoming leadership or dimensional selling workshops, simply let me know, and we will take care of it for you. And both people will be able to come for the price of one person. And lastly, in your packets, there's a feedback sheet like this. The more you get to know about Psych Associates, the more you realize that we really enjoy hearing from you as to your impressions, as to your thoughts on the briefings, what you would have liked to see more of, less of, or differently. So, and also if you would like to have some additional information based on some of the things that Bob and Alan have talked about, they both authored several articles. We'll be glad to forward that to you. Lastly, there's, as a means of saying thank you, when you turn in your feedback sheet, we're going to give you a pocket card that looks like this. But here's a large version of it, which is a nice, easy to use tool that summarizes the dimensional model and some of the skills and concepts that Bob was talking about. So as you pass out, or as you that's our other briefing that we have, is when you pass out. As you move on out and you hand off your feedback sheets, we'll be glad to give you one of those. And lastly, I've been instructed that some of you have asked if you could tour our facilities. We're in the same, one of our offices is in the same building on the 3rd floor. We have some very unique testing facilities, and if you would like to see that up front and close to hand, we would be glad to take you with you. Dr. Mark Reiki and Dr. Cindy Lefton and Dr. Tom Brooks are in the back, and they would be glad to raise your hands if you would so everyone could see you. They would be glad to take you on a tour if you'd like. Thank you all very much for joining us this morning. We're hoping that it was a very good use of your time, and we look forward to seeing you in future briefings. Bye.
Don't bother, I'll wait till everybody leaves and then I'll call it.
Really?
Hey, fantastic. Cooperative participatory problem solving. Gerald?
And it was so easy. I could
me.
just reach in.
To get high endurance, they're persistent, but these are useful for selection. What we're going to focus on today are the things that we refer to as behavioral patterns, the behavioral patterns that distinguish the successful people from the average performers. These are the things that you can plan, manage, control in your own situations. The success factors begin with, again, believe in your product and service. Prospect, make a strong first impression. Build relationships that get results. Ask a lot of probing questions. These are the things that these top guns do. Demonstrate value to improve net gain, we'll talk about that. Proactively surface objections when trial closes. Show resilience in the face of adversity. Call at the top and manage barriers. We think that if you align the behavior of your salespeople with these 10 factors, you're going to accelerate the sales cycle, make your people the difference that makes the difference, the differentiator in many sales, demonstrate value added, develop collaborative relationships, and eliminate surprises that can get in the way of the sales process. So let's look at the first factor. Believe in your sales product. Believe in your products and your services. I had a guy that was selling healthcare services, and this guy says that, I've been given a tremendous amount of time with some C's and some O's. What are C's and O's? C's and O's are the CEOs, the COOs, the CIOs, the CFOs. He calls them C's and O's. I've been given a tremendous amount of face time with these people. So I've really got to believe that I've got something to offer these people that's going to justify my time. I've really got to believe that I've got the best product or service on the market. I've got to show enthusiasm. I've got to convince people that we have the best. You have to believe that you've got the BMW of the industry. One top gun told me, focus on the market segment that demands value. And we don't want to be too competitive on price. We don't want to be preemptive when it comes to conceding on price. We want to sell value. And in order to sell value, we have to be very enthusiastic, passionate, convinced that we can provide solutions. We can provide value to our customers. You have to believe that you're selling something of value. If you don't believe in your product, who will? We have to use things like social proof. What's social proof? Social proof means that in the case of Stan Morgan, all of these artists are using Alvarez guitars. If all of these artists are using Alvarez guitars, it must be a good thing. That's social proof. Stan Morgan is with St. Louis Music, and he has used social proof as a way of influencing people and convincing his sales group that if all of these artists are using his products, they've got to be the best on the market. Legitimacy. What legitimacy means is that when you provide written information to your clients about showing the merits of your products and services, that it's going to be more powerful.
than the spoken word. Those are two influence strategies. Stan Morgan provides written testimonials supporting, these products and social proof. Focus on the differentiators that set you apart from the competition. Are you going to be the price leader in your market? Are you going to be the highest in terms of quality? Are you going to be the relationship leader, differentiating on the basis of bedside manner? Or are you going to focus on being the best in terms of speed and convenience? So this is the first issue or success factor. Believe in your product, in your service, in your company, in your ability to deliver, in your ability to service after the sale, and get your salespeople excited about this. If they're not excited, you're dead in the water. So from your standpoint, how do you get people, how do you build and maintain the product enthusiasm? What's your approach? Is this the English-speaking group?
For us, it's innovation, continually adding new products and newness to the program.
Okay, so you communicate that to your sales force continually? Other examples?
I guess for us, it's the products and services we deliver. If we have the salespeople out there talking about quality, we need to make sure that we deliver on that promise of quality.
Okay. Your salespeople have to be very convinced that your company is going to deliver on quality.
Our company and the companies that we work with.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other ideas? Parker?
Yeah, our sales reps are very technically competent. They can pretty much take a product apart with their eyes closed, put it back together again. So they demonstrate that they understand the product much more than our competition is.
Good. This is very important, and this sounds very basic and trite, but this is very important. And the best sales organizations do a lot in terms of continually surveying customers, finding out how customers feel about the products and services, communicating that enthusiasm to the sales force. And when there are issues getting in the way of products and services, they correct them. They address the issues. And they communicate that to the sales force so that the sales force really feels strongly that we're the best in the industry. And consistently, the top guns say, this is the number one thing. Attitude, positive attitude, belief in the product, belief that we can deliver solutions to customers. And it's a continual effort on the part of sales organizations to motivate salespeople to talk about the advantages of our products over and above the competition.
I wanted just to say that the reverse of this can be really bad for an organization. The reverse of it is that you have salespeople out there in the streets that really don't either think or even know how to differentiate their products and services. And so when you ask them what makes a difference in what you're presenting, they really can't answer that for you. And that becomes a critical part of why they may not be making quota and doing what they need to do.
When your people really believe in their product and service, that's going to be a motivator to go out and prospect. They want to get in front of as many people as they possibly can. They prospect. They want people to see their product and service. The top guns tell us that they prospect like crazy. They find people with problems and opportunities. They talk to as many people as they can. They play the numbers game. Some of the people that we talk to say that they've got the statistics down, the probabilities identified in terms of the number of calls it takes to get the number of appointments that they need, to get the number of proposals that they want, to get the number of contracts that they're expecting. And this is a probability game. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. keep the product pipeline full, is what the star performers tell us. We have to have suspects. We have to be doing a lot of prospecting to find out, are there suspects out there that we can qualify as legitimate prospects? Can we convert these prospects into potential buyers? They're going to buy from someone. Are these buyers, can we convert these potential buyers into buyers, and can we talk to our clients to sell additional services or products or get referrals? But we've got to be working in all of these stages of the sales cycle. That's what the star performers are telling us. Next, once you get in front of those prospects, we need to make a strong first impression. That's what the Top Guns tell us. You have to sell yourself first. One individual said getting in the door is 80% of the sale. This individual said that, you know, I have to send letters, I have to call and call and call. And once I get in the door, 80% of my job is done. Then I can start building relationships. But I have to make a strong first impression. And how do I do that? I have to gather a lot of information about the prospect and the company. I have to plan what I'm going to talk about. Appropriate sociability is very important on the front end. Why do you think that's important? Some people, like to chit chat. Some people like to get right down to business, but appropriate sociability is very important. Find out about people's hobbies, their interests, build a breadth of knowledge to connect with people. I was talking to some very successful salespeople, and these salespeople were engineers, and they sold high-ticket industrial equipment. And they said, we're techies. We like to talk about engineering. We like to talk about the technical aspects of our product. But we can't do that unless we do this first. We need to, and that's not our nature. Our nature is to talk about the product.
Just gonna click the water. First son assumed when he signed on that dotted line and took the oath of office that he may be taken captive or killed in the service of his country. So he is at risk, and I feel very sorry for her, but she shouldn't expect us to just lay down our weapons and go home.
Well, I thought their comments were kind of curious, and maybe it's just the new world we live in. But late last week, there was an American casualty whose father in Baltimore said that there was blood on the president's
pictures on the wall, trophies, different things to find out similarity. And the purpose of finding out similarity is that we know from our research in the area of influence that you like people that are similar to you. And if you can find similarity, you're going to produce. You also know people in terms of the amount of information that they want. The Top Guns say that sometimes the CEO is on a blue sky level, really a strategic level. They don't want a lot of information about the specifics of the product features, functions, and benefits. But the CFO may want a lot of detail. So you have to make a positive first impression, really knowing the individual, knowing what they want, knowing their interests, and knowing how you and the individual can connect based upon similarities and interests and applications and those kinds of things. To recap, believe in your product. Belief in your product will enable you to prospect. It will motivate you to prospect. You've got to, once you get in the door, which is 80% of the battle in the eyes of several of our top guns, you've got to make this